lesbianism and homosexuality, we don't talk about them. They are not part of us. And then these abuses also, we have UN peacekeeping volunteers who have been abused in one way or the other. But in an African setting, we have child abuse in the family settings. Some children are used to do business instead of going to school. And the concern is what happens to these abuse victims, those in the authoritative power or the powerful hand. What happens to them? And that is where we need to reflect upon. But the causes of the abuses in Africa and the world at large is clericalism, the lack of respect for children and their dignity. And there's also the advertisement or what we see in the social media and media platforms. We have drug and substance abuse. So when all these are going on, then the person is subdued or aroused to go into such abuses. But what is actually the cause in the African context? The cause, it is cultural, and we still keep quiet about it. And for African and COVID, yes, it is true. Our leaders in African settings have done well. But religious aspect, because of some ignorance or in the parts of some of our brother and sister Christians, especially the Pentecostal and charismatic churches, they hide behind aids of the Holy Spirit in order to subdue their adepts to believing that coronavirus is satanic, and so only prayer can do with that. But the issue is, our mission is to be the baptized in the Jordan of African religiosity and be crucified in Africa, as said by one author, which I did not get the name correct. So we suffer with them, and then we move with them. That is the mission of the SVD. That is compassion and restoration. We accompany the victim, and then we see what we can do. And just as Pope Francis will say, and this might be addressed to us, are we afraid? The abuses that are there. COVID is there. We have poverty. Poverty is even more dangerous than the COVID and then the abuses. But what are we doing? What are we talking about? Are we ready to face it? Why are we, hesitant? We need the collaborative spirit of the grace of God. And in all, we need to name Jesus as the victim of abuse. We look at the story of Jesus, especially on a Friday, a Good Friday. And in all his ministries, he was abused in one way or the other, chased out of synagogues. But all these abuses, he kept quiet. He did not retaliate. So sometimes, what we also do as Africans and as missionaries, SVDs. But they are pathway to the abuses. What we can do is, just as Angela Merkel will say, for us to retain our dignity as religious and as missionaries, we need to talk about it. We need to be transparent and open up the cases and deal with them once and for all. So we should listen to the people, and just as the synodal way we'll talk about this year and next year, listening to the people, and then we orient them. We have confidence, we need to put confidence in place, and we acknowledge our wrongdoing. Whoever is in charge, the upper hand, the authority, we need to acknowledge and accept that yes, we have done wrong, and we need forgiveness. And if the victim forgives, then there is restoration in place. So in all this, we need to create a culture of safety. That safety is all about transparency, and the traditions and cultures we need to put in place to see whether those cultures are actually allowing us to open ourselves to what is happening in our world today. So, and in all this, the issue is power and authority of the clergy in Africa. That is what is suppressing all these abuse cases. That we give so much respect to the authority, the clerical authority or the religious authority, and so, which is need to stand firm, and then we get towards that restoration. We have good relationship with the victim, and that prophetic diaconia is to do just not that monetary aspect of being charitable towards the victim, but to deal with the case, that emotional aspect of it, that loss of trust and confidence they have had in us, we need to put them back. So the prophets of the human being we need, as a prophet, we need to denounce these abuse and evil activities. And the alternative path to restoring peace is about sitting down together and really look into it. But as religious and as missionaries, especially the African context, we need to really look into the homosexuality and lesbianism, because it's difficult to talk about. And since it's difficult to talk about and it's not in our culture, it is still not accepted, and we do not know whether it will ever be accepted. But it is part of it. It's practice, but it is in a hidden. It's still hidden in the carpet, under the carpet. So we need to respond to the COVID pandemic situation. What is our mission in this context is that compassionate evangelism, feeling the pain that the people are going through. And we need to preach to them that gospel of hope. The gospel of hope is not just about giving them material things or telling them, oh, tomorrow it will be okay with you. But that being solid, we need to share that solidarity with them. If we are actually sharing the same feelings with them, then we will be able to work against injustices in our society that the pandemic has come with us, because it came as a stranger, as a visitor, to put us into shame. And now we have seen the corrupt nature of the religious and the people in Africa and the world at large. So in all this, we need to work towards sustainable development, because COVID has exposed us that we were not ready to look at it. And in all, as missionaries, one of the key points in our dealings is education. If you're able to look at education as a key to doing all this, then we'll be able to work against injustice in our society. Then, if we're able to look into that education aspect as one that will help us in our dealings with the COVID situation and abuse cases, then it is not just about going to school, but we educate ourselves first of all, and then we go into the next aspect of our life. And in conclusion, Father Lazar said we need to rethink about methods of facing the big a big rest. And then the dream is the new path to mission the pandemic has revealed to us. And our mission is to heal the victim, seek justice for them, restore that trust they had in us in the former days, so that we'll be able to get back our credibility as religious and as missionaries working in Africa and beyond. And in all this, we ourselves, we need to be responsible, transparent, and accountable in whatever we do. So that brought us to the end of the input, and we went for a break. And after the break, we were welcomed by Father Tony again, who has led us to share condolences with the province of Congo that has lost 4 confrères in the space of 6 months, and also the cyclone in Madagascar. But then the question still remains. Just as Father Willie told us yesterday, Father Tom has a concern. It's the same concern ours. But in reaction to the seminar above, what we have done was we need to tackle the spiritual aspect of the pandemic and the abuse for proper healing after having had solutions to the physical aspect, that is through the vaccine and then new hospitals being built. But we still need to look at the emotional and spiritual aspect of it. Then the second contribution was as in the form of a question. In the context of the mission, in some cultures at age 15 to 16 years, it's normal to talk about marriage. It's normal that someone gets married. But then if we talk about this child abuse or having the upper hand on the lower inferior person, we need to talk about it. It's a cultural adaptation. And that is the difficulty we have in some of our missions. And then if we want to look interculturally or enculturationally into it, we need to analyze in the light of the gospel. And what is the light of the gospel telling us? We need to preach against or accept what has come onto us. We need to preach against it, but with that prophetic voice. We don't go with brutality. We go the Jesus' way. We give them the chance. It's just step by step, slowly. And then we do this, we need to look at the cultural aspect and the customs and traditions of the people we minister to. If not, if the counter reaction comes, then we will need to run away, maybe in the bright, good afternoon, we say goodbye to that mission territory. And the point in case was that of a polygamous catechist or leader in the church who is polygamous. It is accepted in the cultural setting, but in the light of Christianity, it is not accepted. But the point is, what do we do about it? Do we compromise or we go the radical way? That is a question for reflection. And at 11:56, we went for break for Mass, and in the Mass, Father Willie reminded us of what is keeping us, what is entangling us from opening up to the promptings of the Holy Spirit to following Jesus Christ. And at 4 p.m., we came back again. Father Tony announced to us, that was a point of advertisement of our newly renovated St. Michael's House, which will be a house of study to host conference and passerbys, and is a very cheap, a cheaper way, very cheap house. And you have internet 24/7, water is running 24/7. Yes. Yes, because I stayed in one religious house. We were paying $35 per day, but this one is $25. So it's very cheap. A mode of transport is very cheap also in that area. You have it. And after that, Father General came in to talk about, he first of all talk about faithful to the word, and faithful to the word. And this is his second time he's participating in the Zonal Assembly, and he has a kind of collaboration with the first input. You talk about the pandemic phases, and then in all this we need discernment, but because there are two dangers in our religious setting: activism and then mediocrity. And with all this, we need collaboration. All this happens because of loneliness. And as leaders, leadership, we need to show compassion and guidance and guide the vulnerable in society. So before you can do this, we need to evaluate the structures in our zone, our AFRAM zone. So, but there were urgent reminders. We need to look at the intra and extra aspect of our community and communication skills as far as that one is concerned. And in the end, we will have the statistics of the congregation, which we have access to them. And so I'll move straight to finance. We had a good advice from the finance on self-reliance. If our projects are not profitable, but you have spent so much, we need to look into it. Sell or dispose of that project in order to be self-reliant, and then live on what you're able to do for the province. And we got to Brothers Formation Contacts. We had the history of it. It started with St. Arnold Janssen, with practical issues of them having constructing aspects of the mission. The action plan from the Brothers Assembly 2021, we have them. They want to be visible. We want to train them to take key positions in the missions, participate in vocation programs, organize the come and see communities, and they want to encourage brothers to go for OTP, have oversee training program outside their zone, and allow brothers to have degree programs in philosophical studies and those in. But there are some challenges in the brother formation. You have the crisis in the church is general, that's normal, and then the youth today are not opting for it, and then we have issues with their qualification. And the reaction from the brother formation was that there's the need for formation program for brothers that will be across Africa, their zone. And the concluding remarks, we had the day's activities came to a close with appreciation from the moderator for the day, Father Misa. And then he sincerely appreciated all those who presented reports and inputs. And the evening prayer could not be said due to time constraints. But then the Salve Regina was sung, and we go to a close with the benediction or final blessing from Father Budi Clayton, the Superior General, at 7:40 East African time. Thanks a lot. Thank Father Sami and the team. Now, as he presented, it will be difficult to amend the form, meaning the small mistakes here and there in the form. Are we in agreement with the flow as far as the content is concerned? Have they been faithful to the flow of the discussions? That's why we have to see. Because they are a team of 3 strong men. They will look into it, what has not been correct in the terms of the form, the mistakes here and there. I think they can relook at it. But have they been faithful to the flow of the discussions of yesterday? Or is there anything that has been missed out? So that's what we have to see. So yes.
Something is missed out. All my presentation is not mentioned there. I don't know. I was before the Brothers representative. So can you insert something about my yes. Presentation? That
I actually have it.
Huh?
Yeah, I have it. I'll just insert.
Yes, insert it so that it's not missing.
Is that all?
That's all. Yeah. Okay. Maybe if you notice a mistake or what, you just write it on the paper.
Wait, sorry. Yes.
Yes, what I'm saying is we have done a good job. See, he kind of verbally presented. He was a good flow. But if you throw in the text, there were a bit of expressions that are not exactly that are not expressing what he said. And it's going to come out as a document. You know, anybody ever can lay a hand on it and read it. So when they will look at it, that was physics, and the content was exactly what was said.
So
maybe the next one, if it's possible, once we have internet, if they can send it to us, then we should all try to go over it. So when we can just make us pay, if you have correction, we make.
Okay.
Sorry. That's all. Let us have a good document at the end of the day.
Okay.
On the 3rd day, they should send it to us, but we should all try and go through it. So we can just pay one. If something is not getting well, we get what's it out. That will give us a good document.
So the team of the secretaries will take note of that. If the coming minutes, the next minutes, we can have it ahead of time to check. Yes, Father Alpha.
We have to check on the methods for the next presentation. But some word was used was not in there. So those were. We check the method for the next. To go page by page as just some.
Okay.
Because you will remember.
Father Godwin.
No, I just want to find out if all of us have the laptops. So we can't just take it for granted. But then if we all have them, it is sent to us. Then the other thing I would like to say is because it was read verbally, the text was not followed, I would suggest that they stick to what has been written. They read it out for us to hear so that we can make corrections. If we have to read here, then they stick to what they have written, not to say verbally.
Comment.
And you offer that to also look on the screen. But read it as they have written it.
Okay. So, with those, Father Cyprian again.
Yes, what I'm already saying is good, the last one, but let's also consider the time. If we are to read what is written, for us, we're going to know about 2 hours to do that. So, I think we all have, those who don't have laptops, we have
The WhatsApp.
Our mobile phones and the rest. Let us commit a little time to go through the list. So they can pick one. If you have anything, you just do it, let you. That one will take us to 15, but then we should be sure that the text is there, is what we have to discuss here. Grant them for it, but then it's a bit of content is there.
Excuse me. The practicality of what Father Cyprian is suggesting is a bit difficult because the secretaries, after we finish, they are working on it. what time will they send it to us? Because they go over time to come up with that. It's for me, I find it difficult that at the end of the day, when they finish working maybe around 10 p.m. to send to, at the time people are maybe resting already.
But I think the secretaries are there. We should find out from where they can do it. I think they keep away.
Okay.
Before we are ready to read.
Because I can assure you that
It's okay. It's okay. Now, yeah. Father Sammy, can you say something about it?
The point is, when we finish with this, it will be sent to the zonal coordinator. Together with the SVD government, we will look into the whole thing before the final document now produced by them. But the point is, if what you want it, we can send it tonight. You can send that the report of yesterday and today. We look at it, then we send it back to us. Before the final copy is now accept the zonal coordinator. So further, we have no problem. We can send to you late at night, and then you look at it tomorrow morning. We go through it, as you said.
Okay. So the team of secretaries have no problem with our suggestion. So we can move on to the next presentation. And yesterday we had, among other present, yes.
But now, how do we get to all everybody? We create a group or something. Because we don't have.
How do you get this here?
The coordinator has our emails.
Huh?
The zonal coordinator.
If you have the text, send it to me. I will send to all the participants.
Okay,
I have
thank
all
you.
the address.
Okay, yeah, Father Tony.
It is very, very good on the part of the coordinator to be able to send it to us. Unfortunately, many of us do not read. And let's pray at this time and you read. This time,
I will send
it. So that they don't just waste their time. We'll please deal with all of you. When they send it to us, let us take time to read it so that when we come the next day, we'll be able to.
Father Rex.
Yes, since we are on the Twitter page, when they send walking is scary. So I will ask the secretary that each portion that is ready to be sent, so that bit by bit we'll be able to finish more. Because once it's sent in a bulk like this, sometimes it's difficult. So we ask that once we prepare it's more if it will be sent to us.
Okay, thank you. I think we can move to the next presentation. Yesterday, among other presentations, we had the presentation of the Treasurer General. Today, we are going to have the presentation of the Procurator General. As somebody said yesterday, he's not distributing money. So his is to give us legal advice and not money. He will be speaking about more concrete issues touched generally by Father Lazar yesterday, and I believe he will talk of more concrete examples in the society. Father Peter Dikos, because he's the one to present us the next term. He's the interface between the congregation and the Holy See. He's the contact person of the society with the Holy See. And I believe some of us, we have received some documents endorsed by the Holy See. He's the one getting them. And I believe also our sisters have benefited from his expertise. So we welcome Father Peter Dikos to present what he has to tell us.
So good morning, everyone. Good morning. So Father Tony yesterday presented us as bodyguards of Father Budi. So I was a bodyguard to him also in Congo. I am really happy to be the bodyguard also at this time. So thank you for inviting me for this meeting. And as Father Budi said yesterday, I'm really happy that you have taken this topic for this assembly, because SVDs were always some kind of pioneers, one step ahead of different congregations. And I will tell you also why. And probably we are one of the first congregations also trying to take seriously this kind of topic and try to deal with this topic. And I am really amazed that you in AFRAM zone decided, even though there is not such a range of sexual abuse or different abuse, okay, at least from the data that we have, but you have chosen this kind of topic. I would expect probably Panama or Europe, but you have chosen this kind of topic. I am very happy and grateful for this topic. So, as yesterday was already mentioned, there are different types of abuse. There is sexual abuse, abuse of authority, financial abuse, abuse of spiritual abuse, and I will be touching some of them in this presentation. I will somehow complement those two presentations of Father Stanis and also Father Budi. I want to repeat the things that were already said. I will simply touch a couple of points, and then I will move to the spiritual abuse and financial abuse. As you see, neither the Scripture nor the Catholic Church or nor the Society of the Divine Word condone any form of abuse, and particularly when it comes to the sexual abuse of minors and vulnerable adults. As you can read, the sexual abuse of minors and vulnerable adults was rarely discussed in public before 1970s. So it was taboo, and we know the consequences of this kind of approach. Only in 1980s that the first cases of molestation by priests and religious came to the light, then especially in the States and Canada, then the church started dealing with those cases. But it was certainly too late. And as you see also, 22nd July 2011, Father Tony Pernia, the former Superior General, actually sent the circular letter to all PRMs asking to prepare their own local policies on sexual abuse, using as the base the policy that was sent from the General. And as Father Budi said yesterday, there are still 2-3 PRMs that up to now have not sent the policy on the sexual abuse. And this also reflects our approach to this topic, to this issue. Because Father Budi yesterday said, our approach to this topic, to this issue, reflects also our spirituality. And I think we should take seriously, and as you can see, we revised 10 years after the first circular letter. Last year we were working also on the revision of the policy on the sexual abuse, because there were new documents, and I am really amazed that Father Pope Francis is really concerned about these issues, because in such a short pontificate he issued 2 important documents on the sexual abuse, and he established also the commission at the Vatican for the safeguarding. You see to come up with the policy on sexual abuse of minors and vulnerable adults and send it to the Superior General by the end of this year, 2022. So it's important. I would really appeal to you to take this policy seriously and try to prepare your own policy with your own protocols, because what we came up is only base for you. But you should have to make the reference and also adapt your policies to the local situation, because we were also yesterday talking about culture. Because there is also the civil law, and we have to respect the civil law. Because civil law is on top of the church law. We cannot bypass the civil law, because in some countries, and it is this civil law is reflected also in the canon law, because canon 1085, I think, talks about the legal marriage of a boy of 16 and a girl of 14. So there is nothing against if in the traditional culture, these kind of people are getting married. But there should be the proper procedure, because when we are talking about abuse, then there is, I will explain what is actually abuse. Because if there is traditional culture getting into the marriage in their way, and if you follow the procedure, there is no abuse. There could be abuse, certainly, if there is forced marriage in the traditional culture. Then we can be moving on very thin ice. And we have to be careful not to just give a rubber stamp and say everything is okay. As it was said yesterday by Father Stanis and Father Buri, we have to be somehow careful not to approve everything from the culture. We have to challenge the culture if we see that something is going against the teaching of Jesus. It is not only teaching of church. The first reference should be teaching of Jesus. Sexual abuse, it was already said, occurs all over the world and in all cultures. We cannot deny that. Because I remember in 2006, there was an issue because, or it was even earlier, there was one of the provincials attending the general chapter, and he started talking about sexual abuse. He insisted that during that chapter, the issue of sexual abuse should be discussed. And some provincials from different zones, some zones objected. They said, it is not our problem, it is not our issue. It is the problem of the Western world. And actually, during that chapter, they found out that actually the provincial who was objecting, he himself was somehow involved. So you see that we must be very careful not to go denying this kind of issue. Even if sexual abuse occurs all around the globe, the rate of sexual abuse may vary due to a lack of data and research studies available, or due to the fact that talking about sexuality and sexual abuse is still a taboo in some cultures. And also, we have to be careful that if the people do not talk about that the sexual abuse does not exist. So, as Father Buri presented yesterday, we are working in 79 countries. And we have to face different realities and cultures with their respective traditions, norms, values, and beliefs. Okay, but what can help the new missionaries coming into their mission assignments? It's to have the good and proper introduction program. And not only that, ongoing formation, that they can enter into the culture. So, and actually presenting the policy on the sexual abuse of minors and vulnerable adults should be part of the introduction. When they come to PRMs, they should be given the document, they should read the document, and after a certain period of time, you should call the conference and say, okay, this is the form, you will state there is the declaration, I read the document, and if there is any kind of breach or abuse, it is my responsibility for this. So it is important to take seriously and actually prepare, because this is the protection for you as the provincial or regional mission superior, but also it is some kind of safety for your province, because Father Buri was telling yesterday about when we were talking about the finances. We are crying that the financial resources are getting low, but sometimes you would be surprised how much our PRMs are paying for the sexual abuse because they neglected the cases. You know, in 2019 we had one case of sexual abuse, very serious. But because we took proper steps and we followed the procedure, so far we are safe. Even though the case was in media, we saved our skin. So that's why I would appeal to you, please deal with the cases seriously, because especially like many dioceses went into the bankruptcy. Some provinces one day can go into the bankruptcy as well if they do not deal with the cases properly. The fact that sexual abuse is not always obvious because it can be hidden behind different forms makes the creation of awareness and sensitivity more difficult. And this could be some examples of hidden forms of sexual abuse, forced marriage, as I said. Female genital mutilation, like here in Kenya culture, for example, there is circumcision of girls. Cases of family separation due to war, migration, like now what's going on in Ukraine. And during this period, you know, you might have men who do not care about what's going on. They might be using children and women, vulnerable women, for sex. Sexual online exploitation and child pornography. We must be very careful also with the social media. I will give you some cases later. Because nowadays, whatever you send, whatever you post, it can be recovered. And then you are done. And many confreres actually got caught up with the messaging. Because the girl made a screenshot and sent all the material to the provincial. And the confrere did not have anything to say. Human trafficking. Yeah? So these examples show how sexual abuse and other forms of abuse of minors are often culturally and traditionally accepted, as we were talking yesterday, and not even recognized as such. But we have to challenge those forms of sexual abuse. What is actually sexual abuse? Many times we would define sexual abuse only as intimate relationship. That's one of the examples. But sexual abuse of a minor can be defined as the involvement of a child in sexual activity, not only by touching or some kind of physical contact, but also non-physical contact. So this, the involvement of a child in sexual activity that she does not fully comprehend, and many of them in the sexual abuse do not have an idea what's going on. Then she unable to give informed consent, also in the forced marriages. The girl many times cannot give the consent because, okay, if we take into the traditional, I do not want to go because I was writing also about the traditional marriage. There was comparative studies between traditional marriage, statutory marriage, and Christian marriage. I would not agree always that I would not call traditional marriage always as forced marriage, because there are different aspects and I do not want to go into that. Then there is she is not developmentally prepared, violates the laws or social taboos of society. So children can be sexually abused by both adults and other children or mates also, because we have in some seminaries happened that they were having, or the seniors of the seminary were benefiting from the juniors. So it is not only, you know, that there should be only adults, but also like we have minor seminaries. It can happen, you know, those who are seniors already around 18 can abuse the juniors. And also there can be some kind of abuse of authority, because seniors can consider, like in the military service during the communism, I remember that senior soldiers were abusing those who were coming to the military service. So we must be also careful. So this definition highlights that sexual abuse of a minor is more than just a sexual transgression. It is also, and I would say mostly an abuse of power, an abuse of trust. If you want to abuse somebody, first you have to build the relation of trust. And this, from my own experience, I can tell you, this is the base of most of the sexual abuse cases. Abuse of power and abuse of trust. Believe me. So this definition also shows that a minor is never guilty or responsible if she has been abused. It is always the abuser who is responsible and guilty, because you might have the feeling, or later on the perpetrator can say it was consensual. Okay, the girl or boy might say yes because she is afraid. You know, so we must be also very careful when we are evaluating the case of sexual abuse. As I said, sexual abuse may happen with physical contact, but without physical contact. And we have to report also. We should not report, and you know that preliminary investigation, but the Superior General should already know that there is something going on, that he is not surprised later on if in the meantime the media get the knowledge about the sexual abuse, because it happens that they might call Father General and he would not know about the case. So it is important that you immediately report the case to the Superior General, whether it is physical contact or without physical contact. So you have to report. And also, according to Vademekum, we have to report also those cases that at the end were not proven true. We have to report the cases to the Vatican. You know, just for the future, if something happens, they have the point of reference. Motu proprio Vos Estis Lux Mundi of 2019 defines a vulnerable person as any person in a state of infirmity, physical or mental deficiency, or, and this is the new, or deprivation of personal liberty, which in fact even occasionally limits their ability to understand or to want or otherwise resist the offense. I can give you an example. We had one case. The girl was being helped financially by one of the conference. And the girl depended on the tuition fees of their father. So later on, one day she came, and actually she was proposed to have the sexual relationship. She did not resist. You can say it was consensual. But she was vulnerable because she wanted to some extent continue with her studies, and if she said no, she was afraid that the father would stop paying her tuition fees. So she was not free to some extent. She was we were already discussed many times, that term vulnerable person is not very correct. We would say the person in the vulnerable situation or condition would feel better than just saying vulnerable person, because all of us are vulnerable to certain extent. But it would be better to define a person in a vulnerable condition or situation, and that girl was in a vulnerable situation. So you can see that it is important also now to take these cases into the consideration. Vulnerable adults. So in the same document, attention is paid to three central delicts against the sixth commandment of the Decalogue, consisting of performing or submitting someone to sexual acts by violence or threat or through abuse of authority. That's can be also, sorry. Then performing sexual acts by forcing a minor or a vulnerable person, and production and exhibition, possession and distribution, including by electronic means of child pornography. Because there were cases of some bishops also. They were traveling and suddenly in the custom at the airport, they were taken, they were confiscated the computer, and they had, because the police had already some hints. So the computer was confiscated, they found the child pornography. You are done. So some changes in the penal law, book 6 of code, have been made. And with these changes having taken effect on 8 December 2021, so they are already in effect. And we actually included these changes also in our policy that was sent to you already. So everything is in place. So all these documents with the changes are reflected also in our own policy, general policy. Now, we would like to ask you to reflect also these changes in your own policy. So when you will be sending the policies, we will be revising and commenting on your policies that you will be sending to us, to the general. So sexual abuse is one of the worst things that may happen to children, adolescents, or vulnerable adults. It may lead to severe consequences on their physical health, mental health, their relationships with others, and their faith and their relationship with God. And I can tell you, don't disregard the people who are coming to you and reporting the cases to you after 20, 30 years. Because you might say, if it was serious, they would have come immediately, they would have reported. Don't believe me. Or don't say that. Because those people are in such a trauma that they need to digest what they experienced, and they need a psychological treatment. And many times those who are going through the psychological treatment, they are suggested actually by the psychologists or counselors to report the cases. Because they have no courage, and especially in some cultures. The case that I was talking about, 2019. So people still do not believe that our confrere sexually abused those children because of the authority that he had in the culture. So culture actually can prevent also the people, and we found such great difficulties also to convince all those who were actually investigating the case. They had so much difficulty to convince the victims to come and testify in the court. Because they could be ostracized, they could be actually rejected, or they could be even attacked by the people. So we must be very careful when it comes to this kind of people. So consequences can occur over a short or longer period of time, as I said. So the rate of child abuse during the pandemic has increased around the globe from 20 to 60%, and we can see it also in my statistics. You will see that last year, 2021, we had 6 cases. Usually we have 1, 2, 3, but the last year we had six cases. And they were recent cases. They were not cases reported after a certain period of time or in previous years. They happened last year. So you can see the interconnectedness between the pandemic, as Father Stani was saying yesterday, and the sexual abuse. What conclusions can be drawn from what has been presented? Sexual abuse happens more often than commonly perceived. Then the impact of sexual abuse can last a lifetime if the victim lacks a confidant to disclose the abuse. Then the earlier the victim gets help, the more chance there is of preventing him or her from more serious physical or psychological consequences. An important step is to become involved as entire person with the head, the heart, and the hands in the healing process of victim. as Father Stanis said, you know, also when we are doing investigation, before he was afraid, he just contacted the victim by phone, because he didn't know how to actually deal with this case. Today we have the policies, and we should stick to the policies and to our protocols. And we should really, as Father Budi said also yesterday, our priority are the victims. You know, in these cases, okay, I do not want to say also that we immediately judge our confrere, because there were also a couple of cases, and also we have experience from our congregation where confreres were extorted. And the people wanted just to get the money. But that's a very, very small percentage. But such cases do exist. But also, I would when we are talking about the victims, I would like to appeal to you also to treat the confrere justly and properly, because the confrere, we should apply the same what is in the civil law, that there is the presumption of innocence until proven. You know, no, we should not, also the preliminary investigation, is not a process of judgment. Because then, after the preliminary investigation, we have the process, either it is administrative penal process or judicial penal process, where we are going to make the judgment. But the preliminary investigation is to actually find out whether it is true or not. And we are not putting the judgment on the confrere at the end of the preliminary investigation. And that's why we are not applying the penalties on the confrere once we learn about the sexual abuse. It is only administrative leave with certain requirements. Okay, so there is the difference. And that's why I would like to ask you to treat also confreres properly and provide, if they ask, to provide canonical or civil law assistance, civil lawyer or church lawyer to assist in the process. Okay? So as I said, so there are the statistics we mentioned already yesterday. I do not go into that. So you can see, during my time since I came to the office, we had 35 cases, but actually out of 35, 10 were perpetrated before 2012, and they were reported to the Superior General only after 2012. So all in all, we would have during those 10 years that I am in the office, 25 cases. It is almost 10 years. So I do not want to say we can congratulate ourselves, but when we compare ourselves to other congregations, it also reflects our formation. But my question is, how true is this number? You pose this question. I'm not going to challenge you. You answer. So make some kind of examination of conscience and try to answer whether this number is true. Okay? So this would be the sexual abuse of minors and vulnerable adults. So later on we will go into comments or questions. So now I will go to spiritual abuse. And spiritual abuse is also one of the grounds for the sexual abuse. And you will see actually the interconnectedness between spiritual abuse and sexual abuse. Spiritual abuse is not new in the church. However, there is still certain reluctance to really discern whether it is spiritual abuse or it is just some kind of demand on our formandees or on the leaders in the communities, that it is not always spiritual abuse. We have to discern. What one person calls spiritual abuse to another person, it may be no more than a disagreement or a different way of looking on the spiritual life. So what is abuse? It is a pattern in which one individual, whether an intimate partner or person with authority, uses fear intimidation, violence, or other harm to control another. That could be actually the base for evaluating the spiritual abuse. If there is fear, like in any kind of abuse, whether we are talking about spiritual abuse or authority abuse or it is sexual abuse, fear, intimidation, violence, or other harm to control another. That's the base. And what is the spiritual abuse? It is a form of emotional and psychological abuse characterized by a systematic pattern of coercive and controlling behavior in a religious context. And this can be also some kind of question for the formators in our CFCs or seminaries or formation centers. How free our formandees feel to share? Are they only imposed to follow the rules, or do they have also certain freedom? Do they feel confident and comfortable to express their own views and opinions? Spiritual abuse may include, I am not going into the definitions because it would be too long. Later on you will get the copies and you can go into it. Spiritual manipulation and exploitation. It plays upon guilty feelings of a member. You know, and then you can manipulate, like when somebody does something, immediately you can use that ground to manipulate the person. Enforce accountability. A superior may claim to himself power and authority that lacks the dynamics of open accountability and the capacity to question or challenge decisions. How many other formandees are actually free to challenge the decision, sometimes unjust decision of the superiors? Censorship of decision making, because all decisions are made by superiors. They are not allowed to make the free decision. And this is not applied only to our formandees. It can be applied also to different groups, whether our parishioners or lay partners or in different institutions. It is not applied only to our formandees. Then the requirements of secrecy and silence, coercion to conform, control through the use of sacred texts or teaching, because we had one guy also who were asking sexual relationship and the girl was actually opposing. You know, and he started, but what's wrong with it, love each other? Because even God said that we have to love each other. You know, immediately using scripture to manipulate other people and to achieve your own gratification. Requirement of obedience to the abuser. You know, many times those who are abused, then they are required to be obedient and to be silent. Superiority and elitism. So all these are only a few examples what the spiritual abuse means. So spiritual abuse can have a deeply damaging and enduring impact not only on those who experience it, but also on those who witness it. Because like in the formation centers, if some guys are, because I do not want to say that the same spiritual abuse can be applied to all, but the formator can apply to one. And the other formandees are not blind, they can see that, so it can have the effect, not only on the person that is being abused, but also negative impact on those who are observing this kind of attitude. And one day, they become formators. They can be applying the same rules. So spiritual abuse can take place in a variety of settings. Vocational recruitment or pre-formation, formation, community life, spiritual direction, the sacrament. So you have different fields where the spiritual abuse can happen. Vocational recruitment or pre-formation. Vocational discernment is critical at this time, and yet young candidates can be more easily influenced and therefore abused in various ways. So we must be also careful when we are trying to get the candidates for our society. So knowledge of the age of the candidate and his emotional and cognitive development are essential. Cultural, economical, and family settings can also significantly contribute to spiritual abuse at this time of discernment. Cultural, you know, when we are getting candidates. Because in some cultures, being a priest, being a religious, is social status. And it can be reflected also in the family, because then the family, the relatives, will actually get the status, social status higher. Economical. How many of our candidates also, because I can tell you from my experience in the office, the confreres who applied for laicization, or they left later on the society, when they were asking for laicization or departure from the society, they said, simply I joined the congregation because I wanted to continue in my studies. So discernment should be a mutual exercise. So we should not use also the cultural or economical situation of the candidate to get him in. So discernment should be a mutual exercise. The charisma of the society should not be used to convince a young candidate that this is the only way to love and serve God. So there are so many forms, but if we do in this way, it may kick back. And then if the confreres are actually recruited in this way, in a certain period of formation, they will go. Seminarians and novices, seminaries and novitiates in some parts of the world welcome candidates who are often very young. Given how critical this period is, those who hold the responsibility of formators should have both training and supervision. And you know, many times also we think we send the confrere for the spirituality to Rome or to other university, and they are formators because they have the licentiate or doctorate in the spirituality. That's not enough. Because we are talking also in the ratio of fundamentalists that we are preparing. It is the holistic approach. It is not only spiritual formation, it is human, psychological, and sexual formation of the candidates. So those formators should have broader knowledge, not only spiritual side. Formation. This is also a critical period when formandists can feel quite vulnerable, as they are aware of being formed in the charisma of the society. They will want to please and impress their formators and superiors by their sanctity and holiness. This in itself can bring opportunities for spiritual abuse, because they will follow whatever you say, because they might be also afraid to resist, because again, I can tell you from my own experience, when I was dealing with the papers, you know, documentation of those confreres I was talking about, many of them, they said, I had so many problems already, but I wanted to please the formator, and I did not trust the formator, because I was afraid if I come to him and open up myself, the first thing would say, pack up and go, instead of trying to sit down, listen to our candidate and work with him, try to resolve the issue. If there is no solution, then okay, you can tell him, but many times we go from one extreme to the next. Where we do not have the candidates, we pamper the candidates. Whoever comes, we try our best just to bring him to the ordination, and then we can think we have one priest. And in other cultures where we have so many candidates, the first thing would be pack up and go. So we must be somehow careful also with this kind of approach. We should try to find a healthy balance and accompany our candidates. It is very important to take into consideration the formation, preparation, and needs of our formators, as I said. Community life. For any group of people who live together, there can arise both subtle and demanding relationships. And you know it is not easy. If and when abuse is happening or is suspected, some members of the community might become observers. Others go to a step further and become bystanders, fully aware of what is happening, but reluctant to intervene and leaving it to someone else to report or take action. I want to be at peace. That's not the right, because I remember when I was the postural director after my ordination in Nitra, you know, silence on corridors. There were young guys and they go on the corridors. It was not during the siesta, but they were listening and singing for it. And then the elderly confrere started interfering, you know. How is it possible? During our time, we could not whistle, we could not talk walking on the corridors, and you are whistling and you are singing. You see, it can create so much pressure on our candidates, and later on they can be discouraged and they go. Yeah, sacral silencing. Spiritual direction, accompaniment, therapy. The choice of a spiritual director should be done with sensitivity and discernment. Also, I would question the possibility in our CFCs when it comes to the sacrament, especially the sacrament of confession or spiritual direction, whether they are free to choose the spiritual directors, or whether they have only the list given by the formators. These are the spiritual directors, you can choose one of them. So it should not be like that. Okay, initially, the spiritual director, you are not going into the internal things of the spiritual direction, but at least that you should have the proof that the guy is going there and he is regular and he is getting the spiritual direction. That's very important. The use and misuse of spiritual authority is profound. It can be used to control and to silence. The power of cognitive distortions used by perpetrators to abuse is recognized as extremely harmful. When those cognitive distortions have a spiritual element that can damn the victim in his very soul. Examples of spiritual cognitive distortions: God called me to be a priest, so he must have known and understood why I am sexually attracted, because some people can excuse themselves. So God knows everything. So God knew me when I was entering the seminary. So he knew me, and he knew my future. Why did he call me? And they can start excusing themselves. And actually yesterday it was said, later on, they do not have any remorse of conscience. They go on. I bargained with God that if he could allow me to continue having sex with the younger boys in my parish, then I would give up my free time and work for poor and homeless. You know, he would go, but again, he would excuse himself by perpetrating abuse. If you do not let me touch you intimately, then God will be very angry, because you must always obey a priest. And in some cultures, this is very true. Sacraments also. In any sacrament, we can abuse the person. You know, also, when I was in PNG, there was, we have polygamous marriages, no? And many times the second wife is not free to, no, actually it was the first wife. She was actually banned by one priest to receive the sacrament of confession. So she went to him for the confession, and she said, Father, I am the first wife. When I was getting into the marriage traditionally, he told me that he would get married me in the church. But in the meantime, he took second wife, and I cannot do anything. I cannot leave, because then I have 5 children. What I'm gonna do by myself? So she stayed with him. But when she went for the confession and told this story, the priest said, you have to either get married in the church, or you will not receive the absolution. So then the lady came to me, and I gave her absolution, because this is not correct. You know, and we can abuse actually many people in each sacrament. So we have to be sensitive also with the culture, as we said yesterday. We are not going to approve the polygamous marriages, but if there is the first wife who had the intention to get into the sacramental marriage, and later on she cannot. Why should we punish the lady? And also, you have different types of abuse also in the sacraments. An important reminder, often one form of abuse happens alongside other forms of abuse. There is interconnectedness, as I said. We cannot say it is only spiritual abuse because many times there is something else behind. Signs of spiritual abuse, the victim may start expressing fear and shame of God, that's what happens, become scrupulous, become afraid of his spiritual director, as I told you, speak and pray in a strange way, especially if the scripture was used as the means of abuse. So that was about spiritual, I do not know, so how do I have still, or how should we? I will try to go fast because, so financial abuse and mismanagement. We see also in our society, before the Vatican came with some kind of change in the canon law, Father Rudi already started talking about we should prepare the policy of the financial abuses and mismanagement in our society, because we saw that we have more and more confreres who are who are being dismissed from the society because of financial abuse. And you would be surprised. It was not 1,000 euros. It was not 2,000 euros. Sometimes we came up with huge amount of money. And it was not only that the confrere was getting, as Father Darius was talking yesterday, you know, the salaries, or many times we can be also careful with the social media and those scams. And not many, but some confreres got caught with those scams. And they started borrowing money from the parishioners. They borrowed 40, 50, 60,000, they invested, and money was gone. Later on, people came, they were asking, money was gone. There was no interest, there was no money, what to do? There was one case when the confrere wanted to borrow the money from the bank, but he needed to give some kind of mortgage. So he asked the family. So they came to the bank with him and they gave the house as mortgage for the loan. So he got the money. Later on, he invested. Money was gone. And the marriage of that family almost broke. Because women was opposing against that. But the man was convinced, and he went with father, but later on, okay, the provincial stepped in and he paid something, but again, it is the money of the society that can be used for other projects. So you can see that there is interconnectedness. The Society of the Divine Word is responsible for the temporal goods and financial resources which have been entrusted to it. This responsibility includes safeguarding society's assets, exercising prudence in financial matters, accountability to the superiors and those who provide monetary support to the society, mission procures and benefactors, as it was said yesterday, because Father General with Father Darius, they have a big responsibility. You know, because if something happens, it would come to the Superior General. Because also, you are sending the reports. He sends the report to the mission procure, sometimes even though the financial statement or report is not properly done. He tried to be flexible, Father Superior with the council. Then he says, okay, we will give the time. And many times you use this kind of flexibility and goodness of Superior General with his council to neglect. And you let it go, and later on you do not come anymore to that. So it is a big responsibility for the Superior General with his council, because later on, if, as Father Darius said, they come to the mission procure. Okay, they pick up certain projects. They do not go one by one. They pick up certain projects. If they find out it's incomplete, they can go back to the Superior General, because they can say, it went through the Superior General. You send it. Why did you send it? So you see, you can create problems to the Superior General and his council. So be accountable and proper in the reporting. The society is committed to the highest standards of fiscal integrity, accountability, and ethical principles. I do not want to say we were always like that. Certainly, also, we have a lot to improve, and certainly we are improving. Our conference involved their personal capacity, and pastoral ministry are involved in matters of a financial nature, because all of us who are here, to some extent, are involved in the financial matters. And therefore, it is important that all conferences ensure that best financial practices are being followed, do everything possible to minimize the risk of being accused of or engaged in financial improprieties. However, over the last years, as I said, we had a number of conferences who were dismissed from the society. And I can tell you, as I said, this financial abuse can have very negative effect, not only on the society, on the parish, but especially on the faith of the parishioners. So what is financial abuse and mismanagement? It is an improper behavior that deviates from universal law on the temporal goods of the church, because we have Book 5 of the Canon Law, and we have the proper law, the constitutions and guidelines of our society, constitutions, handbook for superiors, and guidelines for the temporary goods, and civil law of the particular country, because also all these three aspects must be taken into consideration when it comes to the finances. Okay, I am not going through you can go by yourself, but you have different type of abuse. And you have also the references. I didn't get it from my finger. You know, when Father Darius actually came up with, because he is dealing with the papers, he gave me actually the list of all these financial abuses. Because he sees what is going on. Even though they think I am the procurator, I do not have the knowledge about this. Okay, I have to some extent, but it was Father Darius with Christian who prepared this list of financial abuse. And we have the reference to our documents, and also in some cases we do not have yet the references, but we might come up with some references because they are revising the handbook for superiors, the section for the finances, and also the guidelines for the temporary goods. So that's why, even though it was this policy was already approved by the Superior General and his council in principle, but we are still waiting until the changes are made in the proper law, and then we will come up with this policy. So that's why I'm already presenting to you this policy that we are working on that. Prevention of financial abuse and mismanagement. To prevent the financial abuse and mismanagement, it is important that all members have at least a rudimentary financial education and are familiar with the financial policy of the society and the province. And in the initial formation, that was already my suggestion during the formation assembly, and already in different meetings, I was suggesting to provide a basic training to our formalities on the transparent and accountable management of temporal goods. So it would be good to, and I suggested also to formate formation and education secretary, the religious congregations, by bishops' conference, or even the civil institutions. So we should use the opportunity to use those workshops to keep our conference on the track. And each province's policy should include provisions indicating how to respond to and what canonical penalties be imposed on a confrere violating the vow of poverty and abusing and mismanaging finances. You know, so many times we could prevent the financial mismanagement because you as the PRM superior might know already that the confrere does not submit its salary. What action do you take? You let it go, and when it blows up, or you can you can put it on the plate of the next provincial superior, and then he has to deal with it. So, because like with the cases of confreres who are on the nulli stationi adscripti, they have been there for ages and ages and ages, and the new provincial later on inherits this kind of this, and he has the hard work to actually regularize the situation. So it would be the same with the confreres who are already abusing the financial policy of vow of poverty. What kind of steps you are taking to prevent the bigger financial misuse or abuse of the confrere? So you should take the steps. Don't be afraid. Okay, these are what I'm presenting. All this is very unpopular, certainly. But you were not elected to be popular. Sometimes you have to make unpopular decisions, and that's very hard. We know that also Father Budi will tell you stories how difficult it is to make unpopular decisions, especially when it comes to the confrere. When you are doing with the material things, it's much easier. But when you are dealing with the confrere, it's not easy, because you are probably deciding about his future. So we must be also careful when we deal with the conflicts. General recommendations, how to prevent. Ensure a strong and honest leadership that promotes ethical values and appropriate behavior in the province. Many times, as Father Budi said, the fish smells from the head. If the leaders are misusing the finances, if the confreres see that, then you cannot expect they will follow the policy on the finances. They will tell you, fix your life, and then come to me and tell me something. So this is very important, that ensure a strong and honest leadership is in place. Ensure that finances are managed in full transparency and accountability with respect for civil, canon, and proper law. That's what I said. And again, you have the references to our proper law and documents from chapters or different documents. Put in writing the financial policy of the province and keep expectations consistent and clear. Give all members, especially those responsible for financial matters, at least a basic training. Again, you have the documents. Establish a good internal control system on financial administration in the province. You know, it is internal control as well. It is not only external audit, but reporting, like local superiors reporting to the provincial superior. How many times we neglect this kind of part? You know, it's okay, so. But we should be really consistent in internal control. Establish the Province Finance Board Committee. It was, and actually also at the general level, we are working, it was already suggested, there are some steps already taken, but it is not finalized. But even on the general, it was the decision of the general chapter, and we are in the process of forming the financial committee as well at the general level. And Father Darius certainly told the treasurers, it is not only to have in the board or committee just our conference. You should have professionals also. The lay, sometimes it might be costly a little bit, but it's better to pay somebody having him on the board or committee than later on paying fines and penalties. Ensure the responsible presence and involvement of more qualified lay experts and partners in the Province Finance Committee. Maintain a clear distinction between the finance statements, balance sheet and income statement of the workplace, non-SVD entity like parish, and SVD community, and establishing common rules of financial reporting for every branch of given entity, because sometimes in the parishes, Father Budi said yesterday, 33% or around that we are in the parishes. What is the financial reporting? Many times they would put everything in the parish and there is nothing for the society, or they would take everything from the parish and put in the society. There should be actually distinction between this financial statements and institutions. Adopt the regular audits, internal and external, to certify the veracity of the aforementioned balance sheets. Have a clear system of reporting projects money. We were already talking about it. And establish the Province Finance Board Committee. Yeah? And now there is the procedure. Still, you have a couple of points. The church, I do not want to go now in the procedure. So because then it would be too long. But please read it, and while I am here still, because this is only to give you information, we will be still talking about this financial mean, because it is not in place. Even though it was approved in principle, I do not want to drag on because we are running short of time. I do not want to go into the procedures, how to deal with the conference whom is used, because we can talk later about that, but at least you have the document, you can go through it, and later on, still we will be coming back to the procedure, how to deal with the conference, because you have all the procedure. Okay, so I would stop here because I took too much time.
Well, I do not know how to clap. That's what Tony Anissa told me yesterday. So I will not ask you to go this difficult way. Let us give another clap to thank you, Father Dikos, for talking to us densely on this issue. Peter Dikos complimented the AFRAM zone for choosing such a theme, sexual abuse, given the cultural context of Africa. He presented also cases that explicit what is sexual abuse. He highlighted the need to challenge the cultures in which we work, to also help our conference to give, by giving them introduction, a proper introduction as regards to these cultures, to update the policy on sexual abuse in our PRMs, to treat the conference with justice and compassion. He also updated us on the policy of this sexual abuse. He talked to us about spiritual abuse and financial abuse and mismanagement. So we know that, as Father Dikos said, we have the opportunity to approach him in one-to-one basis, face-to-face, about particular cases we may have. But now it's 10:16. With that in mind that we can approach him on a personal basis, we can have some few questions which are more or less maybe general, if I would say. Any question, any contribution, any clarification? Yes, Father Sipia.
Yeah, thank you for the work. Very good. When you came to the spiritual abuses, apart from where you made references to the scripture, the other definitions in the rest, are some kind of critical sources that were given from or some of this reflection or history?
The sources?
Yes. How are the spiritual abuses?
I will send you the resources.
Yeah.
Some resources, some books, and I will send you.
My questions?
Maybe a follow-up. Actually, it's good that our body is also here. And when it comes to the distinction between those who are working in the parishes, from the societies, I don't know how to explain to them for them to understand it. The treasure has been trying to explain facts. Not just get it. It's like I'm working in a parish. The parish belongs to the bishop. So when it comes to the finances of the parish, you want to deal with the bishop and have nothing doing with the treasury. But of course, when they have difficulties, they fall back on the treasury. I don't know how the treasurer is here. Maybe you can which is better. I don't have a big challenge there. I know through the occasion he has tried to encourage conference to, let us show education, but it's like, this cannot work, at least in the Ghana province.
Because, as I said, there are the procedures. If you see that there might be some kind of tendency of financial abuse, that they are not fulfilling their responsibility to report the finances, then there are the steps how to go about. We have to find out whether it is true that there is some kind of income. If there is no income, okay, but I don't believe, because like they are getting stipends, as it was said. So it should be separated from the parish, because also the parish should be provided for the upkeeping of the parish fees and assistant. So it is not only that everything will go into the parish account. So there should be donation, because I believe that there will be people knowing that we are SVD, okay, Father, for the mission. So there should be some kind of clear separation of the finances, but if you have the suspicion, then there is the procedure. I didn't go into that procedure, but if you read the paper, you will find certain steps. But it is not enforce this policy. We cannot apply yet, but okay, to some extent, you can start already challenging. It does not mean that you have to have the policy, because there is the amount of...
Father Godwin. Thank you. I believe we can start thinking about it in terms of recommendations. What Father said is true. Those who are on kind of a subsidy from the society, those parishes, we are able to check their finances to some extent. But those who do not require any subsidy from the society, it is very difficult. And it is true also that we don't run, when it comes to financial matters, as a society, the SVD administered parishes that we are having, our financial structure doesn't cover those in the parishes. I mean, they have their own finance committees or finance councils that the assistant bears or has that direct control. But what we have been saying is that you are not just an assistant structure, you are not just assuming as conference in working in the parishes, you are not just assuming the assistant structures. You are also creating SVD communities. And as SVD communities, we are to follow certain financial guidelines. Let me limit it that way. And so, when it comes to dealing with the communities, the society should have the opportunity to see how finances are done. And because of that, you see a lot of injustices in the system, in the sense that if you are working in a well-endowed parish, you are well to do, nobody checks you. But it is only when you are in a less endowed parish that we have to check you. But it's ironical, because less endowed, you have little, and we go after the little. But those who are having the big monies and all that, we don't have the chance to go about after them. So you see some injustices there. So I already, as a recommendation, if we can put it at a recommendation level, for us to do a follow-up, so that it doesn't appear as if it is just a concern of one particular provincial who wants to do kind of witch hunting or that. But it is something we are all recognizing, and we want to check it. Thank you.
So, yes, we have about 7 minutes to the break, so we'll get some 1 or 2 questions. Yes,
thank you, Father Peter, for the presentation, especially about social and sexual abuse. I have the feeling some conferences are not taking the issue serious, because in one of our interaction, a conference said that for him, he has not signed the policy and he needs a lawyer to explain to him before he can sign. And I was surprised to hear such a comment from a conference, because it's some document is coming from the higher level. It's to protect you and to protect the vulnerable. So in that case, what do we do in such cases for that conference?
certainly you do not need a civil lawyer, because we have the proper law, and the provincial release council set a policy that all confreres have to sign the policy. It doesn't mean, and if he starts opposing, then certainly you can start taking the canonical measures. Also give pre-admonition if you do not sign, okay, because this is one of the requirements, and that's it. So we will start the process. Because there is also our obedience, and this is not only, as you said, for his protection, but also for the protection of the society, church, and also the civil society. So as Father Malik said yesterday, you know, so it has impact on very range, very wide range.
Any other question? Yes.
Actually, just to tell that confer, when he made the vows, he doesn't ask first the civil lawyer about the validity of the constitutions. So, and we profess the vows according to the constitutions of the Society of the Divine Word. So that's the implication of the constitution. So he doesn't follow, then it's okay, then there are consequences. Yeah. Just another point. When Peter mentioned about several reasons candidates might join the society, the economical reason is one of them. When reading the reflections of those who ask for secularization, meaning joining the diocese, that's one of the most, the highest, maybe the strongest reason. People change from religious life to the diocese because of economical reason.
After so many years.
After so many years. So really for me it's very important to stress the aspect of religious life, of the consequence of being religious in the formation. That motivation that we are religious, that should be really strongly promoted in the initial formation, that people have a knowledge and be aware of the consequences of being religious. One of the superiors general in one of the meetings of the USC shared, for him it is more painful to realize that a priest, a member of his congregation, after so many years realizes that he is called to serve as priest in a diocese than in the society, in his society. After so many years, getting all this formation, everything, and he realized later on he serves. He feels the call to serve the church better as diocese priest than as it's painful, meaning what is done in the initial formation. No? We cannot do everything, surely. We cannot do everything in the initial formation. After so many years, if somebody comes to that awareness, then it really puts a question as well as on the information. It's a comment on that.
So, thank you. On this note, I think we can take a break. Can take a break and then come at 11. 30 minutes.
As we take the break, Sister Prof, this thing from possibly from Ghana, I think, and some poison sauce. It says that we can use it for the tea break. So everybody should try some before you. So that Sister will feel very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nós temos que trocar alguma coisa para pagar o teste. Não sei como é que é.
Quanto custa? 50 euros. Porque o texto está 4 mil euros.
Eu disse 3 ou 4 mil shillings.
Então 3 a 4 mil shillings vai dar. São 20 estados. Vai dar mais.
In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Good afternoon, dear brothers and sisters. I welcome you again to this Eucharistic celebration. It's a good way to start our assembly around the world. Prayer, we take time to listen to the word of God and to the Holy Spirit of our Lord. Because we are on the process of becoming His disciples. Sometimes we take things for granted. We think that we are on the right path, but our human weaknesses sometimes drive us far from the Lord. So that's why in the beginning of this Eucharist, let us pause for a while, think of our sinfulness, for the time we are not able to respond really positively to our mission, to the call of being disciples, where we had our own mindset on the way we do something, but we need to come from time to time to the Lord to ask Him to do. And the Lord might give us answers during these days. So let us prepare ourselves to be open to receive those answers from the Lord as we call upon our sins and ask Him for His pardon. I confess to the Almighty God in my thoughts and in my words, in what I plan, in what I fail to do, to my most greatest sorrow. Therefore I ask this universal seeds and bring us to everlasting life. Amen. Lord, help us. Grant us, O Lord, we pray, that the course of our world may be directed by your peaceful rule, and that your church may rejoice.
Everything you do is abuse. Even computer abuse.
This and trouble in devotion. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, religion makes with you in the unity of.
I've seen Okay, I think this should work.
That's USB.
That's USB.
Yes. What do you have? That's what is
Yes, but I really choose this. We possess the world, not only the blessings of things, because I always believe the greatest what happened in Madagascar, because in our political old men, Father Tom, he reminds us certain things from the newspaper. He was asking me, you are going for assembly? Yes. And you know that when the assembly in Madagascar, what is the result doing for it? I did not take the answer. I did not take the answer. You see, everyone goes through. Not just my understanding, around here, there are people who are in need. And that's why Jesus is telling the sermon. What I want to well, or say that the man is okay. If only all of us here that we have decided to respect the commandments, as it is said here, maybe life will be better, but we want to be famous on the side. I don't want to come there. But Jesus is telling me, right. All one thing is missing in the richness. We are so attached with this richness that we don't see what is happening around you. Go and sell all that you have and come and follow me. Go and sell all that you have. Go and sell all your ideas. Be all that you something new and come and follow me. When they don't have confidence to yourself, to your knowledge, be open. Be open.
Humility. It will be okay. That's okay. So I was telling Jerome the same thing.
We have a small mission. We can't believe or not. It's not thousand money. So, don't take them. All mission, all Christian promises are equally important for us. We need to hear from them. We need to hear from others. Don't be just us. That's us. And we share what Ghana did for example. Somebody very important. I know that George was inclined to the new mission in Nigeria, but yet they give him to a small mission like Zambia. It's important. The discipleship of Jesus means that we live what is us personally and we follow him. And that is when my mom is pastor used to use very often detachment. This is one detachment. The first week where they share detachment from your family. When you come here in this game for detachment. This is about it. Detachment. So before Jesus to respond to his mission to inherit the kingdom of heaven, we need to be detached from many things. Jesus himself, for example, detached himself from the divinity to become a man like us. And when he was the one who started the mission, not ever was told to lose head, was detachment. And for me, it's the detachment for us as we live here is more than money, more than that. To receive whatever will come to us during this time of sharing. And it is very important to then we come together to share. Despite Corona, despite all the crowd, we come together to share. Be open to receive something new and give something new to others. So we pray that as we start listening this afternoon to speak from the Father General, and receive all the information about what is happening around us. also now we have next general chapter, and then SSS as a reflected during the general chapter around the wickedness of the world. We pray all this abuse, this pandemic as the wickedness of the world. As we are going to reflect upon this, let us be open to what Jesus is telling us. What is you? What can we do? As the language, what can I do to help you? What can we do to be successful in our mission in AFRAM for the next 10 years? What can we do? Let's see what or any inspiration. And I don't know that. You are indeed, O Lord, the fount of all holiness. May God therefore this evening pray, by sending various people when not taking forward, so that they will come for us the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. At the time it was declared, and every into his passion, he took bread, and giving thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and eat of it, for this is my body, which will be given for you." In a similar way, when supper was ended, he took the chalice, and once more giving thanks, he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it, for this is the chalice of my blood, the blood of the new and eternal covenant, which will be poured out for you and for me, for the forgiveness of sins. Do this in memory of me." The wisdom of faith.
You need a white color?
Five colors are there.
Yeah, this
blue. Blue and white missing. Blue and white missing.
Ah, yeah. That's right. And these are very, very important colors.
diario in Ghana, especially this very important. Oh yes, I remember. Yeah. Lorsque on était au Canada, c'était pas Prosper qui était le représentant, c'était il travaille au Bénin, Félix, parce que je n'ai pas fait écrire son nom dans le...
Là, c'est Prosper.
Oui, as to in management alors je vais réviser ce texte-là et enseigner ça parce que je vais regarder ce que déjà prospère et je sais que c'est
So it's you.
Shall we start? So before the next session, I have a communique from the Procurator General. He wants the PRM superiors who have some particular cases to discuss with him to approach him the course of this week while he's with us. So cases of molestation and other cases we would like to discuss with him is available. So now we proceed with the next presentation by Father Henry Sanchez, who is going to talk to us about learning Bible. I don't have to say what it is because he is here, he will tell us. Especially about the recommendation made last Zonal Assembly. He will talk about it, and also for the 40 years of Learning Bible, I guess, and he will share his apostolate in that entity with us. Thank you. We welcome Father Henry Sanchez to give his presentation.
So, good morning, everybody. Good morning. And thank you once again for inviting me to join you to share our joys and also how we accomplished the recommendation that AFRAM voted last General Assembly, last Zonal Assembly. So you see, Verbum Bible for Africa and Madagascar. It's a very daring title because imagine the whole of Africa and Madagascar. We had a very big vision, and not only Madagascar and Africa, we even go up to Haiti, where we have our African origin, you know, brothers and sisters. So what is, what is very important now is that We just accomplished 40 years in the service of the Divine Word. 40 in the Bible is very significant. I don't need to give you a lesson for that. And for me, but I do not really share so much of my life, but allow me this time, because in a way you are my brothers and sisters. I just celebrated my 40th anniversary as priest last year.